Welcome into the Take the North podcast. We have hit the summer break for the NFL calendar. I am Adam Studzinski. I produce the Take the North podcast. I'm alongside Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune today, and I'm filling in for David Haugh. So everything that I say today that you don't like, you can blame on him. No, I'm just kidding. All my takes are my own, I promise. But anyway, again, as I said, we are at the summer break portion of the NFL calendar, but don't worry, Take the North is going to be here throughout the next several weeks leading up to Bears training camp as we fill the void. There's never a lack of content, Dan, in Bears world, especially around the city of Chicago. So things, I will just for our listeners, it might be a little disjointed over the next couple weeks as we have our own stuff that we are moving around with, but we'll be here as often as we can.
Well, and as you mentioned, training camp just around the corner. I'm looking at it because you and I were joking off the air. It's now referred to as the EGO Outdoor Power Equipment Chicago Bears training camp. And for those interested, the rookies will report to that on July 16th. The full team will be in camp Friday, July 19th. So we are 1 month away from being on the highway and in the express lanes of the highway for 5 months beyond that. So as much of the dead time as there may be in the next couple of weeks, we are going to accelerate really quickly into a season that I think you would agree is highly anticipated, has got a lot of meat on the bone, and it's going to be really fascinating to watch it all evolve.
It's funny. We were just as an aside, we were talking on the Score today in the Bernstein and Holmes show about the amount of content we already have for the Bears as we enter summer, and we hadn't toyed with the idea that a lot of the stuff we already covered in minicamp is stuff that gets covered in training camp. So we're already past some of that stuff, but we just kind of toyed with the idea of this isn't going to stop. We're going to have a fountain of things coming our way, especially with Hard Knocks coming to the Bears. We're going to get even more access than we would normally get. So yeah, it's going to be quite a ride this summer.
As Hard Knocks, the Hall of Fame, the crossover practice with the Bengals. The month of August is going to be jam-packed with less than, a lot of times it's a mundane, grindy filled lead up to the preseason, which then leads you into the regular season. This year, I think it's going to be enthralling at every step of the way. And obviously we'll be there for every step.
Absolutely. So again, you're listening to the Take the North podcast. Download, listen, and subscribe as you can hear us on the Odyssey app. We are presented by Odyssey, and you can hear us on the Odyssey app and wherever you get your podcasts. And keep your questions coming, by the way, before we dive into our lead topic here. You can hit us up on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at Take the North Pod. And you can email us. Our Gmail is takethenorthpod@gmail.com. So keep all your questions coming, as over the next couple of weeks we'll certainly do more than one mailbag, I'm certain. So we're kind of laying out our plans. But Dan, to business here. You guys at the Chicago Tribune, you and your colleagues have a piece coming out soon, which you do almost every offseason, and it's a Q&A with position coaches for Bears rookies. So if you could, we'll just start off with, what is this piece?
So
how do you guys go about this?
It has started on ChicagoTribune.com as we speak. This year, a little bit easier because the Bears only had 5 draft picks this year. And so my colleague Colleen Kane and I have reached out to the college position coaches of all 5 of the Bears 2024 draft picks to get their insight on what makes each of these guys tick, what makes them special, why the Bears targeted them. And so we were able to kick that series off this week again with 5 draft picks. We can go one a day and cover Monday through Friday. So you've got your obvious. We've spent the entire offseason talking about Caleb Williams. A chat with his passing game coordinator, Dennis Simmons from USC, is coming on the website soon. Rome Odunze, Torrey Taylor, Kieran Amagaji, Austin Booker. Those are the 5. And so a really good way of getting some early thumbnails on a draft class that a lot of people think could be transformative for this franchise for obvious reasons with the 2 top 10 guys, but those other 3 guys equally intriguing in their own ways and how they can possibly contribute to a team that's on the rise.
I know we're going to focus on Rome Odunze here for the purposes of this conversation, but I can't wait to see, and I'm sure David can't wait to see what
Tory Taylor, right?
Tory Taylor's position coach had to say. I bet that was a fascinating conversation.
No question. And he's a guy that's going to develop a bit of a cult following. I would bet that as soon as the EGO Outdoor Power Equipment Chicago Bears training camp opens in Lake Forest next month, that you're going to hear every day sort of the cheers from the stands of people eager to see what trick shot Tory has up his sleeve and what his next magic trick is. But as you mentioned, because we did spend most of April, May, June talking about Caleb Williams, I thought it would be good to kind of peel the curtain back just a little bit on Rome Odunze, who the Bears obviously were really, really, really hoping would land in their lap with their other top 10 pick. They were potentially thinking about, as we've seen through numerous documentary clips, trading up to get Rome Odunze. They didn't have to do it. They're pairing him with Caleb Williams. And so I had the opportunity to talk with JaMarcus Shephard, who was for 2 seasons Rome Odunze's wide receivers coach and the pass game coordinator at the University of Washington. He has since moved on to the University of Alabama. But after 2 years with Rome Odunze, JaMarcus Shephard had a lot to share about why he is so enamored with not only the skill set of Rome Odunze, but the way he approaches the game. And so I thought it would be good to listen to a couple clips there. The first one here we're going to listen to is just kind of the overall view of JaMarcus Shephard. Again, Rome Odunze's position coach at the University of Washington for the last 2 seasons, talking about the wide receivers wiring and kind of what makes him special in that regard. Take a listen.
He just has this quiet confidence about himself that he's capable of really ensuring that he has the type of success that he's looking for in his life. And so, at times, I would call him, Rome the philosopher versus Rome the warrior. And at times, this warrior mentality would come out for Rome, just in how he talked and led his teammates. And then at other times, there would be this philosophical approach to how he led and approached his teammates. So I don't know. There just isn't a ton that I think that he's incapable of. I think the young man his ceiling is so high. And for him to be able to be that way with his teammates, I knew the size and speed aspect of it was also going to come as well. He was deceptively faster than a lot of guys on the field that were going against him. But he's just big enough that he can bully you at the point of attack.
Yeah.
And, as he felt NFL scouts start to say, hey, he wasn't creating enough separation. He needed to find a way to catch more 50-50 balls. We were getting them too open. I mean, he realized that was going to have to be a part of his game to be a high-level receiver.
When you say Rome the philosopher, tell me a little bit more about how that shows up.
Rome is an ultimate leader. So he is one of those people that when he walks into the GM's office, when he walks into the CEO of a company's office, that he's going to really be able to speak to them in a way that they're gonna feel like he's on the same level that they're on, but also his teammates will feel that way. So he has this philosophical, make you think approach to how he leads people. But then there's moments where it's this animalistic tough guy that comes out of nowhere, and you're like, hey, hold up, you're not allowed to be a tough guy like that. You're supposed to be this reserved, calm, cool, collected customer, and all of a sudden you're out here ready to rip someone's head off. And so that's the cool part about Rome, he knew when he had to be philosophical in his approach with his teammates, but also when he needed to have that brute force to lead them into the position that we were going to the national championship.
Studs, there's some really cool stuff in there. You hear JaMarcus Shephard refer to Rome Odunze as quote unquote the ultimate leader. And you have seen in his early days at Haugh that he's a guy who connects. He's a guy who connects with his coaches, with his front office bosses, with his teammates in the locker room. Rome Odunze is innately driven to be his best. But I thought what was really cool about that description is that there was an identification of this cutthroat competitor, and it kind of gives you a glimpse into why in the biggest moments of the biggest games last year, the University of Washington felt really confident calling Rome's number every time they needed to play. And he answered almost all the time, because there is that cutthroat, he called it animalistic in that clip that comes out and allows him to be at his best. I'm curious to hear how you reacted to some of that description from JaMarcus Shephard.
Yeah, that was that's really good stuff. And I think that it gives you more of a window into why the Bears fell in love with him. I mean, the film we all can see. We all knew, especially with Washington playing in the spotlight in the college football playoffs and the national championship, everyone saw how great of a player Rome Odunze is. And in a lot of years, he's probably the number one receiver off the board. And this happens to be a loaded wide receiver class. So I think that clip right there really shows you, like, even more so why the Bears fell in love with him off the field, because he's got a special character off the field, a guy who, like you said, connects, a guy who is also, though, competitive as all hell. And I think that that's something that the Bears have. That's a type for Ryan Poles. That's what
right.
I think that we can go over the last three years now of drafts. You can point to guys that he wants to go after. It's guys that are competitive, guys that have an edge, guys that want the ball in those winning moments. And I think that it's also awesome knowing that, obviously college and pro, very, very different games, but the fact that Rome has a reputation of being the guy that makes the plays in those big moments, that's something the Bears have been missing desperately over the past couple seasons, from 2022 and 2023, the inability for almost to a T, an inability to make plays in the fourth quarter.
One of the other things that comes with Rome is this intelligent side. And you heard this from Matt Eberflus from rookie minicamp through the end of mandatory minicamp and OTAs, that they've been able to pile a lot on Rome's plate, and that they expect his development to kind of accelerate quickly because of how much he can handle. This echoed a lot of what people were saying throughout the pre-draft process about just how smart of a football player he is, how he has that feel for the game and an ability to understand what's happening around him to enhance the way he goes about making plays. So I had a chance to also ask JaMarcus Shephard about that, about the football IQ of Rome Odunze, and here's what he had to say in that regard.
As high a level as anybody that I've ever coached. I mean, the young man truly understands. It was to a point where I needed to find ways to continuously challenge him during the meetings, in order to ensure that I was keeping his attention. Obviously, he obviously is a professional, so he was always going to pay attention. But I wanted him to be engaged in those meetings. So, I mean, he's learning about the D-line, the techniques of the D-line. He's learning about the different pressures and really truly understanding exactly what the quarterback is reading on play concepts. So, I mean, I knew for Rome going into those pre-draft meetings, I mean, he was going to crush that piece of the interview process. And so, I mean, obviously he did, and that's part of the reason why he was a top 10 pick.
Studs, it's like in high school, you've got, your regular classes, and then you have your accelerated classes, and then you have your AP advanced placement classes. It feels like Rome Odunze has been an AP student of the game of football. And hopefully as he transitions to the pro game with a much more sophisticated curriculum that he's going to have to absorb, that ability to use his brain as a weapon and as an asset becomes something that helps get him going quickly. Obviously, he's going to have help. We're going to talk a lot about DJ Moore and Keenan Allen as mentors and guys that can kind of guide him, into the early stages of his NFL career. But he also has an intelligence there that should be working for him, and that also will be a plus.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the fact that he's learning all those details in college, again, the offenses aren't as complex. There's going to be more to learn at the pro level, about protections and all that extracurricular stuff. And so, but I think that's the fact that he's now being described as a quick learner, that's something that him and Caleb Williams have in common. They've both been described as people you can throw a bunch of information at and they'll be able to handle it. And, obviously we'll see how fast they're adjusting once we get onto the field in training camp and in the preseason. I was thinking about this today too, though, just along the lines of the Rome being a fast learner. I think it's great that he is a fast learner, but the fact that they have so many weapons on this offense, as far as not including the quarterback, even DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, who we haven't talked about hardly at all this offseason, and DeAndre Swift. Like that's a lot of good pieces to have. And then you also have this rookie wide receiver. So I think that it's great that, if he's learning all this stuff, that's awesome. But the fact that they don't have to force all this down his throat to get him on the field immediately, I think is really important for him, because he can learn at a pace that is not like, hey, we need you right now.
Right.
Instead, it can be like, hey, all right, we threw all this at you. Maybe you're not quite getting all this, but you're really good at the X spot. So focus on that, and Keenan Allen and DJ Moore will take care of the rest until you catch up.
Yeah, run your own race, and don't feel any added pressure to emerge faster than you're ready to emerge. And obviously, I think the Bears are banking on him emerging fairly quickly, but you don't have to see an entire season's worth of hope hinge on that. You've got a lot of other things that you can lean into and lean on to get your offense going. Look, the other thing I asked JaMarcus Shephard at the end, and you can read the entirety of my back and forth with him at chicagotribune.com, as we mentioned, was just what his intrigue level was in seeing Rome paired with Caleb Williams, who is obviously a competitor in the Pac-12 against the University of Washington. And in simplest terms, he said, it's going to be a fun story to tell one day. And I love the way he phrased that, because it feels like that's where it's headed, that we're going to look back 10 years from now and go, man, that was really cool when that union came together. You and I both know we've seen a lot of stories that felt like they were headed one way and they didn't head that way. And then you get this surprise twist and you go, oh, wow, that certainly ended poorly. But if this is a story worth telling, I'm glad we're going to have the opportunity for a long time to tell it here on this podcast and in other forums, because it does feel like the Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze union was something dreamed up in a storybook. And hopefully that continues to show itself in the Chicago Bears.
Right. And so let's stick with that for just one more brief second, because you mentioned earlier about the clip that hit social media from the various documentaries you've been seeing about draft day, where they took us inside the Bears draft room leading up to the number 8 pick in the draft, which the Falcons had. And now we know they famously took Michael Penix, but we now have the actual clip out there of Ryan Poles calling the Falcons and asking them about trading up and giving them an initial price. And we don't know how much, we don't have anything else of if the conversation got further. It doesn't appear that it really did. But the fact that the Falcons turned down what was going to be a future 4th round pick, that's what Ryan Poles offered on the phone call, out of, according to Mike Florio today, this is Tuesday on The Score, because they were afraid the Bears were going to then flip the pick. It's like there's just some weird, and like you said, like aligning of stars there for the Bears. Like, oh, they didn't have to give up a 4th round pick because the Falcons were doing God knows what. Because I've never heard of a team trading up on draft day 1 pick just to flip the pick. like I've never seen that before, and the fact that it countered the Falcons' mind is just insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of paranoia there, right? Like that you have a guy that you absolutely want and you can't live without him. Ho hum, where have we heard that before, right? Like, and so it happens at times on draft week, and the Bears were fortunate that they were able to keep all their draft capital and still wind up with the 2 players that they went into draft night dreaming that they would get, and here we go. Now we're off on a journey here in Chicago where. Again, you just hope that it materializes the way that it has the potential to materialize, because again, it could be transformative. And this draft class as a whole has the potential to be the catalyst for a long overdue breakthrough. I think you would agree, a long overdue breakthrough. And so again, like just one last tease there. If you're looking to learn more about Caleb, about Rome, about Torrey Taylor, Karan Amagaji, Austin Booker, get to chicagotribune.com this week. We're rolling them out one day at a time, and you can hear from their college position coaches to get a lot more insight and intel into those 5 guys.
That sounds excellent. And so, Dan, we'll go ahead and move along here. There's a few things that we didn't get to with all the mountain of information we were dealing with during OTAs and mini camp. And of course, obviously, like we talked about here, a lot of that was focused on Caleb Williams and now a little bit more on Rome Odunze. But there were a couple things that you picked out that you wanted us to touch on here. And so we'll start with a couple back-to-back clips here you wanted us to hear about from Keenan Allen. Why don't you set that up for us?
Yeah, so you're right. There, I mean, we left mini camp and OTAs with a lot of material that was like, man, there's a ton here still. There's a lot to unpack with this football team, and it's going to be fun to do that. And we're, again, we've got the next month to pick away at some of that, and then training camp will be full-fledged with more content. But Keenan Allen's one of these newcomers who's got a great perspective. He's been around the league a long time. He's seen a lot of things. The blessing that Keenan Allen has had in his football life is to play his entire career with really, really good quarterbacks. When you come into the league and you're paired with Phillip Rivers, and then several years later, the Chargers organization drafts Justin Herbert, and you spend most of your football life catching footballs from those guys, it explains why you can get past 10,000 yards. Obviously, Keenan Allen brings his own skill set and talent to that table. But I think that perspective allows Keenan Allen to have a pretty cool lens on the ability of Caleb Williams and also the growth process of Caleb Williams. Not that long ago that Justin Herbert was a rookie, and we know what Justin Herbert has done production-wise during his first 4 seasons in the league. Well, now we've got an opportunity to see if Caleb Williams can match up in that regard. And so a couple back-to-back clips here from Keenan Allen about playing with Phillip Rivers and Justin Herbert, and then also kind of translating that into the world he's now living in Haugh.
Are there any similarities between Caleb now and Justin in 2020 when he was a rookie?
Absolutely. You got guys, like I said, just the huddle call in itself, just being able to hear it and give it to the guys, with and knowing what you're saying, knowing what you're talking about, then going to the cadence and, getting everybody on the same page with motions and seeing the defense, checking here, safety comes down, you got to know what to do. So, it's definitely hard. Everybody goes through it. It's one of those things where, you got to go through it to get to it. So
you spent most of your career playing with really good quarterbacks. What did you learn from them that you can share with Caleb at some point when it comes up?
I think the best thing is confidence. Both of Phillip and Justin has tremendous confidence. They believe in their arm, they believe in their talent, and they believe in what they see. You got to be able to see it, and you got to be able to make something happen right now. And if you second guess yourself just for a little bit and you hang on just too long, something bad can happen. So just understand what you're looking at and just make a play.
That last one, Studs, was, just a reminder of how quickly you have to make decisions and how confident you have to be in what you see and your ability to deliver the football, translating what you saw into what needs to happen. And I think we kind of hear that clip and I inevitably think back to some of the things that prevented Justin Fields from getting his career through certain checkpoints in his 3 seasons with the Bears. And it's just not getting there quick enough and not seeing it and throwing it with conviction. And we know, obviously, we documented on this podcast for a couple of years how lagging the passing production was because of that. You don't want that to happen with Caleb Williams. One of Caleb Williams' greatest gifts is one of the things that Keenan Allen stressed was really vital to Phillip Rivers and Justin Herbert: confidence, unflappable confidence, and the understanding that if I am prepared the right way and knowing what I am seeing, then all I can do is turn it loose and be me and make plays. You're hopeful that translates, obviously, as Caleb Williams gets going here, again, with a couple of veteran receivers that can really guide him along in the early stages.
And I think that something that is confident as I think that Justin Fields is as a person and as a player, I think that something that was holding him back was, and I don't know if he'd ever admit this, but a fear of making that mistake and a fear of, I don't see this guy open right now, so I'm going to hold it, and now it's too late.
Yep.
And you can't do that in the NFL. You have to have, as you just said, the confidence to, this guy's going to be open. I know he's going to be where he needs to be. I'm going to throw this ball right now. And I know I can make the throw, so I'm going to rip it in there. And so I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And, I know that some of the reports coming out of like minicamp and whatnot were positive in that regard, but it's remains to be seen, right? We're not going to really know until we see it in an actual game.
No question. And the first part of that clip that we just listened to was a acknowledgement of the very elementary level that Caleb Williams is at right now, trying to spit out a play call in the huddle with the type of enthusiasm and emphasis that allows every other guy in that huddle to know what their responsibility is in that play, and then getting up to the line of scrimmage and knowing what the cadence is on that play. And so there are some really, really basic checkpoints that the number one overall pick still has to get through before we get into preseason game action, and then obviously the more meaningful action in the regular season. And so you have these two forces kind of pulling against each other, and it's that grand potential that we know Caleb Williams has, and the understanding that his present right now is really, really loaded with some heavy, grind-filled, detail-oriented, just basics of playing the position before you can ever turn all that other stuff loose. And so it would be really, really, really interesting to kind of see how that goes here when they reconvene in July, and then as we get into August.
It's not something that you think about that much because we're so used to just watching the program and seeing the quarterbacks call the cadence. We don't often think about how quarterbacks in college, especially in the modern college game, almost never have to call a real cadence.
Right.
They're using claps. They're using a lot of mainly just claps. It's not that verbal, and there might be some of it, but there's not hardly any hard counts. And I think Caleb even said that he hasn't used a verbal cadence
since high school.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a big adjustment, and probably something he's going to be working on a lot leading up and into training camp.
It's right. And it's not something that is going to like restrict him, but it is something that's going to take time, and everything that's on Caleb Williams' to-do list takes time. And however much time that takes is the delay for getting on to step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to, 2065, because that's what it takes to play quarterback in this league. So the faster you can get through some of these things and get comfortable, you always hear me talk about comfortable, confident, and then you have command, and those are kind of the 3 steps of playing quarterback in this league. And so you got to master all of that one step at a time. And I think the Bears are very in tune with the idea that Shane Waldron's verbiage is do not skip steps. Make sure we stay on the step that we are on until we have absolutely mastered it, and then we'll move on to the next one.
All right, Dan, I think we talked enough about the offense. Let's talk about the defense. There's something from Jaylon Johnson you wanted to bring to our attention that we had yet to touch on coming out of those optional camps and mandatory camp.
Yeah, we talked a couple weeks ago about how frequently the phrase top 5 defense was being thrown around at Haugh. There is an internal belief, particularly from the players on the defensive side of the ball, that they are ready to take the strides that they made down the stretch of 2023 and just launch into 2024. And you feel that confidence when they're all together. You feel that confidence when they're making plays. And Jaylon Johnson has been, as you know, a really great voice for this defense now, and an emerging voice over the last couple of years to kind of articulate what the feeling is. And so he had some sentiments that he shared during minicamp 2 weeks ago, just about where this defense is at and where it can go in 2024. And I just thought it was worth taking a listen to as we set the stage for that side of the ball.
A blessing just to see how far I feel like we've came. I think too, just last year, leaving a lot on the table early in the season, and now being able to pick off where we left off at last year, I think is a good feeling. I feel like even adding, of course, Kevin coming in here and adding his veteran IQ to the game, just calling out things, allowing us to play faster, us being on the same page. I feel like for me, too, having him now instead of Eddie, I feel like it's been a very smooth transition, just coming in and building and talking about how we want to play certain things, how he sees it. I mean, we see a lot of the game the same way. So I think just on that part, and then just also, too, getting everybody back together, back, like I said, back where we left off at. So, I mean, it's a lot of energy out there for us to have. And I think we can definitely take it up a few notches this year, and then we're going to have a good offense to go against and make us better. So I think we're very excited for the opportunity in practice and for this upcoming year.
Studs, I think there's an expression of belief in that soundbite from Jaylon Johnson. I think you hear him describe the energy that this group is feeling right now. There's also an endorsement, which was pretty common through the month of May and June, of Kevin Byard, who was obviously the veteran safety that the Bears signed in free agency to replace Eddie Jackson on the back end of their defense. And you just hear that consistently from the players and the coaches on the defensive side of the ball, that this is a guy who has been dependable his entire career. He's played at a high level. He understands what he's seeing on almost every snap. And when you can communicate that to the guys around you, that allows everyone to play fast and play in unison with one another, man, you can make some special music there. And so that was notable as well, because Jaylon was not the only person through OTAs and minicamp to single out Kevin Byard as someone who has brought a little bit of juice to this program.
That Kevin Byard signing, I think, is even more interesting considering what Jaquan Brisker had to say about the fact that they're not changing sides of the field anymore. So when Eddie Jackson was here, Jaquan and Eddie would flip sides depending, and Jaquan was always the strong, basically. So he's always, but now with Kevin Byard here, they're not necessarily switching sides of the field. They're basically staying on the same side of the field, and they're kind of alternating who's playing what position, which I think gives the Bears a chance to disguise coverages a lot more, because Eddie, as good as he was, especially at his peak, he was never a box guy. He was always, his best thing was playing center field and making plays on the ball. And Kevin Byard it's funny because he's the only safety in the league that people considered better after 2018 than Eddie Jackson. And now the Bears have that safety, and neither of them are as good as they were then. They're older, but I think Kevin Byard is still really good, and I think that's a really important signing. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out. Because now, especially now back to the point of there being continuity on the defensive side that Jaylon touched on, with so many guys coming back, and with a guy like Kevin Byard who can just step in, though they've been talking about how they have already been using different kinds of coverages and disguising more coverages in these various camps than they had last year, where they were just kind of doing the skeleton theme because they're still learning the defense. The fact that they can come into the season with the basics already down and just start working on how they're disguising coverages, I think is really neat and is going to help them ideally get off to a better start than they did last year defensively.
No question. The defensive start was part of the big disappointment of the month of September and early October last year. I think this group feels like it has momentum with the way they finished last year. I think if they feel like they've got continuity with essentially 9 starters back from that group a year ago, you feel like you can get rolling quicker. That will obviously be put to the test during training camp. But man, I tell you, like that defense is a story that I think we're going to be chronicling very closely in the month of August. Certainly we're talking about one practice with the Bengals in August, but I think that will be a really fun day at Haugh because, presumably Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins will be running around there and testing you in various ways. And so that'll be a good competitive measuring stick at an appropriate time for the Bears in August. And yeah, this defense, again, we've said it before, they're going to be asked to be the engine of this team in the short term. And so I think they are ready for that responsibility. And certainly their talk this offseason has given you the feeling that they're ready for that role. And
it's the thing is, I think we have to remember the best unit on this team entering training camp, the best known unit is the defense. As much as we talked about the offense, and understandably so, they drafted 2 offensive players in the top 10. One of them is a quarterback, but the defense on paper is their best unit, and they're going to be the ones that are going to be relied upon early in the season, ideally, while the offense and Caleb Williams particularly gets up to speed. So all right, Dan, I think that's about it for today. Any more odds and ends you got? I guess we have to talk about Aaron Rodgers doing Aaron Rodgers things again.
I was just curious if you knew where he was. You were successful a little bit more than a year ago in booking him for the show here when he was calling in from the darkness retreat. He might be back there on an ayahuasca high or something. I was just curious if you knew why Aaron Rodgers missed the Jets mandatory minicamp and what could have been more important than that, other than the ability to kind of create attention for yourself. But I didn't know. I figured maybe a friend of the podcast, we had some intel on where Aaron was hanging out.
No, not yet. I lost his contact. Whatever contact I had for him doesn't work anymore. And yeah, I don't know what that guy's deal is. The guy is just, he's so what's the word I'm looking for? He's
Off
just
the
so,
deep end.
there it is. Yeah, he's just I don't for him to say at the end of the season last year that they need to remove anything that doesn't have to do with winning, and then you don't show up for mandatory mini camp, and it's like he doesn't need, he doesn't need this camp because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the game. He's going to show up and know the playbook and everything, but come on, man. Like it's a mandatory mini camp. What else do you block out these 4 days to
3
go
days.
be
It's
in New
3
York?
days.
3
I mean,
days.
it's
3 days.
essentially 3.5 days. Yeah, right. And my goodness, you are coming off
you're coming off an injury.
An injury where you missed all but 3 minutes of the season, and you just don't have it in you to give those 3 or 4 more days that's in the summer to be a leader for your football team. Strange stories out of New York. It's no longer in the NFC North. That's probably good news for everybody across the board, including the Green Bay Packers, who seem to have gracefully pivoted to the Jordan Love era, and we'll see where that takes them in 2024 as well.
Their season last year, I think, obviously Jordan Love took big strides during the season, but I think that they played like a team that felt relieved to be out from under that weight. and I think that they feel, and they obviously, at least from based on last season, are better off without him, and that's why they wanted to move on. So anyway, all right, anything else, Dan, before we get out of here today?
No, we're going to move on as well. We're going to move on into this little small window. I tell you all the time that I get the question all the time, what do you guys do in the off season? I say, find me the off season. Well, this is the off season. We found it. It's right here during these next 3.5 weeks. And then we're back full bore here. But as you mentioned, we're going to have podcasts and content all the way leading up to, what did we call it? The EGO Outdoor Power Equipment Chicago Bears Training Camp, right around the corner.
Is it EGO or Ego? I don't know. Or is it?
I don't know. They were all capitalized, so I figured I would just say the letters. Either way.
EGO. So yeah, we'll go with EGO until we get corrected. So all right. Well, thanks a lot, Dan. Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. I'm Adam Studzinski. I produce the Take the North podcast. David Haugh will be back later this week. We're working on a special guest. Hopefully, Dan will hear from you again next week, as you do, I believe, have a little time off, and so. We'll be around, and we'll keep you updated on anything Bears wise. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast. We'll catch you next time.
Great talk. See you out there.